Hello, everybody. It's George from Ireland. Welcome back to my channel again. So, commenting on the Ukrainian incursion into Kursk, which has been going on for almost 4 weeks now. They began on the 6th of August, 2024. And so they've expanded their footprint in Kursk. They claim to control about 1,300 square kilometers of Russian sovereign soil. Now, that's probably a slight exaggeration. The other thing is, even when the Russian military is withdrawn, that doesn't automatically mean Ukraine controls it. Some of it they control, others bit of is, unclear, or just unoccupied. And so Ukraine has moved a little bit to the east there, not so much to the west, up towards the border with Belarus for various reasons, partly because they might want to threaten Belgorod. There's nothing to threaten near Belarus is important, and they don't want to spook Belarus into intervening. Belarus has massed troops on the border with Ukraine, which is a dilemma for Ukraine, having to dispatch troops to guard its northern frontier. So, what was the objective of the Kursk incursion? Now, Ukraine hasn't said, but there are several possible ones. We can speculate is to offer a land swap. If you want your land back, Russia, you got to give us our land back. Now, as the thing is, at most, therefore, Ukraine is occupying something like 1,300 square kilometers of Russia, whereas Russia is occupying more like 150,000 square kilometers of Ukraine. So there's if they got the similar amount back, the Ukrainians, they would still have a huge amount of their territory under Russian illegal military occupation. The other thing was to create a buffer zone around Kharkiv, the second biggest city, so to force the Russian artillery back and out of range. Now, obviously, there's some missiles and rockets can go beyond that, but not so many. They tend to be more expensive. So Russia has to husband those. And we can tell, obviously, this stung Russia because they launched their biggest ever barrage of rockets, missiles, drones several nights ago, the biggest barrage in the war. And Ukraine shot down most of those, and actually some damage was inflicted on Ukraine, but it was minimal. And that was Russia lashing out. They had to be seen to be doing something. So Ukrainian air defense is more and more effective. It's never going to be 100%. And the thing is, the air defense missiles are also pricey and are also limited. So they can't shoot down everything, even if it was possible to. Even though, they could easily bring it down. They're going to say, we're just going to have to let that one go. We think it's hitting an unimportant building. Even it's going to kill people. They can't save everyone. They just don't have the munitions. And that is the harsh reality. These are the painful choices that war imposes. Securing Kharkiv succeeded somewhat. The land swap thing, we'll have to see what negotiations happen. I mean, there could be outright victory for Russia, which is the case. Land swap's not going to happen. There could be outright victory for Ukraine. I think that highly improbable. But in that case, land swap would be irrelevant. Other thing is, I think mainly a diversion, thinking that it would panic Putin and have to withdraw tens of thousands of troops from East Ukraine to try and push the Russians out of Kursk. And that hasn't happened. Though Russia has withdrawn some troops from Ukraine, it's in the several thousands. The Ukrainians who've invaded Russia thought to be around 6,000 troops, so quite small. But these are troops that Ukraine can ill afford to spare. And the Russians have continued their relentless advance towards Pokrovsk, admittedly very slowly. But Pokrovsk is quite important as a transport nexus. A lot of roads go in there and out of there. And so a lot of supply trucks go via that city. You say, yeah, but just go off-road. And obviously, Ukraine has off-road vehicles like every other military, but only a limited number. And so it's much more difficult to supply the troops with the munitions, with the food, anything else they need to bring forward reinforcements, to bring back wounded men, if you have to rely on only off-road vehicles. So that would be a problem for them. And obviously, a lot goes by train as well. So trains definitely can't go off-road. So they're trying to take Pokrovsk. That will cause significant supply problems. And so much of war is something as boring as who can get there fastest with mostest in terms of munitions and whatever. Who was an American general in the Second World War who said, "What is it? Amateurs talk tactics and their professionals talk logistics." When an army marches on its stomach, okay, it's not just about food; it's also about munitions to some extent, even medicines, bringing the wounded in, reinforcements in, so wounded out, even prisoners out, and so on. Another thing is to capture prisoners. At least 600 Russians taken prisoners of war. There are claims there's over 2,000 Russians who've been taken prisoners of war. That's almost certainly false. Often they're conscripts as Rosgvardia, border guards. I'm not sure about police or FSB. And the idea that they could be exchanged for Ukrainians who've fallen into Russian hands. It's thought that Russia holds about 2,000 Ukrainian prisoners of war. Ukraine now holds over 1,000 Russians in total as prisoner of war, as well as obviously Russia's kidnapped something like 16,000 children, other adults, particularly elderly ones, and often taken to remote parts of Russia, Siberia. The children have their names changed, their dates of birth changed. If they're young enough, can be brainwashed, forget who they actually are, false birth certificate, false passport, so they can't find their way back and their parents can't trace them. So some of them have been released by mediation through places like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and so on. Ukrainian incursion to Kursk anymore. I'm surprised they didn't go further west to threaten Belgorod. In some ways, it's been a resounding success because they suffered very low casualties. I mean, a bit risky to cross the border at all. But and much further west to try and take Belgorod north of it, cut off the roads and railways from Belgorod. No retreat, no reinforcements, no munitions coming in. Would Belgorod run up the white flag at that time? Maybe, and that would be a big win for them. They could capture a few thousand Russian soldiers at one go, or they could try and have a fighting retreat, break their way through the Ukrainian lines to the north, the Russian defenders of Belgorod, to get out of there. But Putin does not want them to retreat, so they haven't gambled that heavily. What else? And I thought that they could get much further and try and outflank the Russians in Luhansk Oblast by attacking to the north of them, because once their troops are to the rear of them, will they panic and retreat or whatever? It certainly concentrate their minds and think we can't be advancing, we've got to be defending our position. So it's been semi-successful, and the surprising thing is that Putin hasn't reacted more strongly, somewhat undermined his reputation, what's happening. And again, one of the things that made me don't anticipate is how relatively honest Russia's been about it. That yes, this incursion is happening, and over 150,000 Russian civilians have been evacuated from Kursk Oblast and Belgorod Oblast. So the news is spreading. We had to leave because the Ukrainians have taken it, and they're saying it's an anti-terrorist operation that Russia has to run. They want to underplay it, so as not to panic the public. And of course, it's not very serious in terms of territory. The country is at 18 million square kilometers. If you lose 1,300, well, who's going to notice that? Admittedly, it's relatively economically valuable, fairly strategically important. So, yeah, they've had some success for the Ukrainians. It's not been as spectacular as perhaps they were hoping, because Putin hasn't, as he would see it, fallen into the trap of overreacting, withdrawing tens of thousands of troops from East Ukraine, which would push the Ukrainians out of Kursk and Belgorod Oblast just by outnumbering them very heavily. But at the same time, that would slow down the tempo of the attack on Pokrovsk and other sections of the eastern front in Ukraine, and allow the Ukrainians to have some respite, consolidate, strengthen their defenses or whatever. Now, Putin's going to have to push them out eventually, but when's it going to be? Maybe he'll wait to the end of the campaigning season, like November, when after that they're going to gain almost no ground in East Ukraine, and say, all right, now let's concentrate on pushing them out of Kursk Oblast. If not that many troops attacking, simply bombarding them so heavily. Yeah, but we shall see. The Ukrainians are better at maneuver, and I think that they haven't used this skill as much as they should. They're adept at that, whereas Russia being very rigid and there's blind obedience to orders, there's just no flexibility, there's no adaptability. They can't react to the situation. The commanders lower down the chain of command to say, we're going to still achieve the objective, but in a different way. We're not going to attack to the west, we'll attack to the east or whatever. We'll use units we said we weren't going to attack, or actually we can see this is impossible now. It's too heavily defended or something like that. So we're not going to attack. Either they follow the orders even when they're stupid, even when they're out of date. Yeah, so that's why you can outmaneuver them quite easily. They've got to refer decisions several echelons up the chain of command, get a decision be passed back down. Someone very senior has too many requests, too much information coming in all at once, and can't deal with it. Uh, you know, the the propitious moment for actions often punch channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon. Donate to PayPal, George Callahan 79 at gmail.